Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much to the department for inviting me to be here. I'm really thrilled to be part of this conversation. I'm going to talk about my current position, my path to getting here, and the skills I've built along the way and used in various positions. So as Amelia explained, I'm the curator of philanthropy at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. So let me start by talking about what a curator in American history does. There are 4 components to our job. Research, which includes original scholarly research, research about objects we're considering collecting, and research for exhibitions. Collecting objects and stewarding objects in our existing holdings is another key component. Sharing objects and sharing knowledge is a third. We share through exhibitions, through digital platforms, through events like Objects Out of Storage, where we bring objects out of storage and share them with museum visitors on a given day, or special events as Adrian and I did with a colleague, Margie Salazar-Porzio, to have a special event on Latino philanthropy and baseball. Object records in our database are another key way of sharing knowledge. Many of our records in our database are already available online, and most will be soon, so that's another way of getting things out to people, and scholarly publishing also. And then finally, service is a component of our job, service to the institution and service to the profession. More specifically, what's a philanthropy curator collect? This is a new position for the museum. So I'm going to show you a few of the objects. I think of philanthropy as the exercise of power through giving, and I'm interested in exploring how power in giving is shaped, experienced, and contested. So a few of the objects I've collected are this nest box used in bluebird conservation. Okay. Oh. This banner, which comes from fundraising efforts for humanitarian relief in China during the Sino-Japanese War. There were fundraising events held throughout the country in and beyond the Chinese-American community in the late 30s and 40s. This portrait of Eliza Hamilton, as you probably know from the last song of Hamilton, an American musical. Eliza was involved in founding an orphanage in New York City. And this poster from a street health fair held in New York City's Chinatown in 1973. It led to the creation of an important community health center. So this is a story of power being exercised from the bottom up to increase access to medical care. And another component, another part of my collecting is oral histories. I've been collecting oral histories as I started to create this collection, and I had the privilege of collecting an oral history from Earl Lewis in his role as president of the Mellon Foundation a few years ago. So there are important ways that my position is similar to an academic position, as Emil was saying, but there are also key ways in which it differs. One is that I now think about space. Let me explain to you what I mean. This is the museum's long-term philanthropy exhibition, Giving in America. And then this is another exhibit, Art and Industry. I curated my first year in my job. This is a first-year special. I'd never worked in a museum before, and I curated not one but 2 exhibitions. I didn't originally curate Giving in America. The museum had the money for the exhibition before the money for my position. I was a script reviewer on Giving in America, so I played a small role. But this section, Giving in the Art, so this is a 30-foot artifact wall. The section Giving in the Arts is 10 feet, and that section changes each year to look at a particular area of giving. Currently, we're focused on giving and health. So that I've curated now. We're working on the 3rd rotation for that. And then in the other 20 feet, I rotate objects in and out as I collect new things or need to take things out for conservation purposes. And both of these exhibitions, which are across from one another, are outside the Presidency and First Ladies exhibitions. If you've been to the museum, it's on the 3rd floor. So they're in a very high traffic area. which is terrific, but it also means that people are usually seeing these exhibits when they're on their way to or from somewhere. They're in basically a hallway space, and people can approach the exhibits from either direction. So the exhibitions need to be comprehensible and legible quickly from either direction. They really can't work chronologically. People are walking by, they stop, something catches their eye, and they look, they dip in and dip out quickly. So that makes a big difference to how you put together an exhibition in this space. If it were in a confined gallery, you do it differently. Another thing I really hadn't thought about is relationships in terms of construction of knowledge. Trust is the basis of collecting, and trust comes from relationships. So to be able to collect objects and to share stories and to co-create knowledge, I have to spend time developing relationships with individuals and communities. And that's something new in this position. So how did I get here? I'm going to start the story of my career path in my college years. Between my sophomore and junior years in college, I took a year off and volunteered on the Clinton Gore campaign, and then interned in Washington at a Middle East peace advocacy organization called Americans for Peace Now. It's very small, and I worked as the congressional liaison, meeting with staffers on the Hill to tell them a little bit about the organization. Finished college. After college, I worked for several years as a pastry cook and pastry chef in New York and DC. Then I came to grad school. I started in 2000. And while I was here, actually my first semester, David Hancock took us in his Atlantic history class to the Clements Library to learn about the resources there, and indirectly but very meaningfully through the respect he showed for the staff there, and particularly the manuscript curator who we were meeting with, he implicitly suggested that this was something worth considering as meaningful work. And I got a job while I was in grad school working there part-time in the manuscript division processing collections. And a couple of years after I started there, an opportunity arose for me to curate a small exhibition on the history of the American circus, and I seized that opportunity. Finished my degree in 2008. I had a postdoc at Yale. At the end of that, I didn't have a job. I was about to have a baby, so I spent the fall with my daughter. And then when January rolled around, I started adjuncting at Catholic University, and I taught a couple of classes. After several months, our childcare situation fell apart, and I spent several months full-time taking care of my daughter. And then over the next couple of years, I had a small gig at American University, teaching as part of a Teaching American History grant. We got some part-time childcare. I was working on my book. All that was fine. It's not a bad time to have that, time with your child. So sort of the timing worked out okay. But then after a couple of years, I wanted to get my career back on track. And I realized I didn't have a lot of public history experience, and that might be something beneficial. And then one day I had this eureka moment and realized I could combine my history background with my pastry background and teach historical classes as a way to engage people in exploring history and to burnish my CV. So I found a local cultural institution that was interested. I taught some classes. I also developed a blog because I realized no one would sign up for my classes if I didn't have some sort of online presence. And I wrote elsewhere, including for the Washington Post and some other blogs. That was great experience. It was not financially viable, but I learned quite a bit. So now it's 2013. The American Historical Association's National History Center advertised a position for assistant director, and I applied. I think my food history experience helped me get that position. And I also think, and Jim Grossman, who hired me, can say if I'm wrong, I think my experience at Americans for Peace Now, where I gained a little bit of experience on the Hill, was also helpful because the center runs a congressional briefings program to bring history into policy conversations on the Hill. So I had a little bit of familiarity with the Hill. So I worked there for 3 years, which was a great position. I loved working there. I ran the center on a day-to-day basis. I helped develop the congressional briefings program more. I helped launch something called, what that's now called the History and Policy Education Program. And I also work part-time at the AHA proper on the career contacts part of the career diversity initiative. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and be able to, because I've talked to so many graduate students about career diversity, and I really applaud the department for having this conversation. So then it's 2016, the Smithsonian advertises this curatorial position, and I applied and got the position. I think what made me a strong candidate was that I am a historian of philanthropy. My dissertation is on humanitarianism in the 18th century, my first book. And when I started thinking about applying for that job, thinking about my job talk, I realized, objects would obviously be essential to a position at a museum. So I went back through my dissertation notes and realized they were full of references to objects. Charities buy a lot of objects that they need things, to run their programs. So I had a little something to talk about and to explain how I would use objects to explore the history of philanthropy with the public. In addition, as I said, I curated a small exhibit at the Clemens grad school, so I could talk about that in my job talk. And I also had experience engaging multiple audiences through the food history programming, through the congressional briefings program, and the National History Center's other programs, and these different fora. So there was a lot of serendipity, but it was also a matter of knowing how to weave these threads together, and that's something you learn in grad school. How do you construct a narrative out of a lot of disparate threads? So in the last couple of minutes, let me emphasize a few skills that I think I've built and that I think are important and would encourage you to think about. One is engaging multiple audiences. You already do this. If you're teaching, if you're presenting at an academic conference, if you're talking about your dissertation topic with your parents or family next week at Thanksgiving, you are going to engage them in different ways. You meet audiences where they are. So keep doing that, do it intentionally, and find opportunities to deepen and practice those skills. These are skills you can use in any and all positions. You could ditch history next week and go into sales, and you will use these crucial transferable skills that are invaluable. Another key skill is collaboration. A lot of people have talked about this, and I'm not talking about collaboration with historians. I'm talking about which is relatively easier because people have a common framework. I'm talking about collaboration with non-historians, and I knew this was going to be an important part of my current job when I started and walked into my office on the first day and saw a table and chairs in addition to a desk. That material culture told me that this was a place where I'd be meeting with a lot of people, and I would need to collaborate. And this is at odds with our training in a lot of ways, where we publish on our own, although maybe less so, but than in the past. But you publish on your own, and you go to a conference, you want to talk and ask a question that shows how smart you are and your project. Collaboration, as I think you probably know, requires active listening, not thinking about your own question in your head, and it requires a lot of patience. It takes a while to develop projects, to hear what other people's priorities are, to build support for what you want to do, but in the end, your projects are stronger. And then the last skill I'd emphasize is the distinctly non-sexy skill of financial skills. Knowing something about accounting and about budgets. You need money to do things. If you know where the money's coming from and where it's going to, this will stand you in good stead for having the ability to do your projects. If I could offer one piece of advice to the department, I would suggest that it consider sort of an accounting, one-credit accounting for historians kind of class. And law schools do this kind of thing, and no matter what position you work in, you will find these skills valuable. So one closing thought. Careers unfold over time. You take something from every job. So I urge you to reflect throughout your career on what you've learned from different positions and to recognize what you can bring to new opportunities. You're all incredibly smart and talented and accomplished, and I'm confident that your careers will flourish. Thank you.